I'm so glad to be here. We argue for near over far, small over big, personal over corporate, and simple over complex. And down in the details today, there's just one footnote that is physical over abstract. That means I would prefer gold and silver to Bitcoin to Federal Reserve notes. And I would prefer land to a promissory note from the federal government to pay the coupon at the end of 20 years. Much rather something physical than something abstract. I argue that you should love your neighbor and buy local. And our theme here on the David Tulis Show is making things come alive here, right? Not waiting for the good people in Washington to act, not waiting for our betters in Nashville to act and bring about some new remedy that paid for by inflation or taxation. Let's do it ourselves. Can we do it here, or do we need the good people to help us? I think that the welcome of the good people is diminishing, and they may be in the mayor's office, they may be in the halls of the General Assembly, but their welcome is wearing a little thin. And since there is always the prospect of a revolution, I want to head that off. I want to head off a violent outbreak against these people who also have families. They have yards to take care of. They have grandparents and older parents, and their children go to school. They pay taxes too, right? They go shopping at the same farmers markets you do, some of them, and or if not there, at the same Aldi store where they get the best bargains. And so we don't want a revolution, because then you're going to have people getting injured. And revolutions always end in one thing is promised in a revolution: not that there'll be better people in charge, but that there will be centralization. We've had centralization in the rise of administrative government, administrative law for 75, 80 years now, at least since the progressive era in the 1880s. And so that's 130 years. And so the revolution, though, is one that has some prospect for violence. And so what we're trying to do is head that off. We want people to think, well, I can't stop what's happening, and I really can't make it better directly, and I can't resist against it directly. So what do I do instead that kind of goes around the problem? In other words, how can the theory of obliquity, of oblique treatment, of going at things at an angle, serve my family and serve me? How can I win while I'm losing? Right? I'm losing here, I'm losing there, and I've been made subject. I'm not free. I feel afraid. I'm afraid of officials. I'm afraid of letters in the mail. I'm afraid of the government, and afraid of losing my job. And of course, I'm afraid of terrorism. So I think we need to have a wall, and we need to have Trump there. We need to have a stronger military. And my fear is pervasive. That's where we are. And many people who are conservatives are particularly prone to fear. And what they need to realize is on the point of terrorism, that terrorism is one of the smallest problems we have. Terrorism is a tiny, tiny problem, but it is a religious phenomenon. I've been reading how that's possible, and how no solution, no military solution, no surveillance or security solution will work. None of them can possibly work. And terrorism cannot be fought by these means. It's not warfare. It's not crime. It is a form of religious service done to an ideology, and often that ideology is Muslim political Islam, which is a political system with a total worldview and a strong component of godness of God and of deity, of religion in it, to draw fealty, to draw obedience to his precepts, which are often requiring acts of suicide, acts of great valor. Suicide bombers are valorous in what they do. They're serving their cause. I would say their cause is wrong, and they will be burning in hellfire on the other sides of that blinding flash. There will be only judgment in eternity. But still, they are devout, right? They are sincere, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves for that higher cause of God and country, or God and the caliphate. Well, this is David Tulis, and to avoid there being an explosion, we're trying to see here in Chattanooga what to do. And so there's kind of a credenda and agenda. There's kind of a credenda, in other words, what to believe, perhaps, and then the agenda is what to do. There's a story that I want to mention. I've not been able to get all the details I want, but there's an effort to raise funds to organize and to overturn the ordinance in Chattanooga that does not allow food trucks to sell from the street. And the activist behind it is named Lisa Dunny here in Chattanooga, and she has already more than 3,500 supporters. And she's wondering why we don't see food trucks selling drinks and hot dogs, hamburgers, and the like downtown on the city streets. The city has had an ordinance in place since 2012. That's 5 years now. Section 20-149A that says mobile food units are prohibited from operating on city streets, sidewalks, or public property within the city limits. This petition that Lisa is making is made to repeal this ordinance so we can allow our food trucks back on the city streets. And she has in her post a whole series of photographs of food trucks from probably from other parts of the country that show very colorful usually they're straight body trucks or vans, service vans that have a window on the side, big letters, and some ones called local slice. Get a slice of pizza, a hot pizza from this truck, and a very cold drink full of ice, and a yellow liquid, right? One that makes you jump when you drink it. She says food trucks have grown in popularity over the past few years in Chattanooga and in other cities. So apparently there are some here in town. Repealing the ordinance would create a fun environment for people, she says, and families of all ages to get out and socialize with the community, she says, and enjoy delicious food and drink. Now, if you have some experience in this area, give me a call, 800-8949, 800-8949. I always have time for your call. You, my listener, just drop in. It also helps, she says, people who work downtown during the week and not to take their entire lunch break looking for parking. Now, this is important. I think this is a great point that Lisa Dunny is making, and this petition has been running just a few days. And Colin, this is David Tulis. You're live on the air. What's on your mind?
Well, on your point about food trucks, I think it's kind of interesting because America is really missing out, not just the South and Chattanooga, but America in general is really missing out on the whole food culture that we have overseas, where you have street food and food trucks and all these kinds of things. And the only reason we're missing out on them, people are willing to do it, is because of legislation. That's my point. Thanks.
Well, that's right. You go to New York, the most international city. Thanks for the call. The most international city. At every turn, you find vendors with hot dogs, falafels, foreign fare, often steaming aromatically there under the lamppost and the blinking "Do Not Walk" sign as people gather with their bags and their elbows and their fine shoes, waiting to cross. And you need just a hot dog with some mustard and ketchup on it, a little relish. There it is. It's $2.50 here. It's hot. It's in your hand, and you've gotten it just before the light turns, and you're going to cross with the mob across one of the great avenues in Manhattan. And you're supporting a small business. You're not taking part in subsidizing by your patronage a large giant chain. You may, some of these vendors in New York may be part of a union. They may be part of a company, though they look very unique and very distinctive. That's part of their charm. Their charm is that the wagon and the appurtenances around it, and maybe the fact that he's got some, current magazines for sale as well, 4 or 5 top magazines in the Wall Street Journal with his Coke and hot dog. It shows entrepreneurial spirit, and you're right. We want to have that. That's a great point. It's not common here, and I think if you have people eating as they stand about or walk about, you have a much more convivial downtown. I think Lisa Dunny is right, and make sure you go there. It's change.org /P and then Chattanooga. If you go that far, you'll probably find it. It's a change.org petition, and she's trying to gain support for overturning the ordinance. Chattanooga is such a great town that has evolved so much in the past 5 years. She says it's time to remove this ordinance and let our great local food trucks set up on roads and serve the people. Take time to support our petition. So please do that. And it's a petition for Chattanooga City Council, and the language is repealing the ordinance, not allowing food trucks to sell from the street. Change.org. Do take part in that. And if you know Lisa, ask her to give me a call. I think I've contacted her through Facebook, wanting to have further word from her, an interview. Maybe she has a background in the food business. Well, this is David Tulis, and we're arguing for local economy and free market, live on Facebook at Nooga Radio, and also live on YouTube at Hot News Talk Radio. And we're glad that you can evaluate there, or your wife can. I know you don't care. Your wife, if she happens to glance over your shoulder, she's getting the children off to their routines, the ones who are at home still. She can say, well, Tulis's bow tie works today. Now, Jeanette was not at home to pass on this. She's visiting her mother in Huntsville, and I made this decision this morning about this lime green bow tie with my slight light purple shirt and my brown jacket. It may work, it may not work. I'm not sure. I know you don't care. You, my listener, the guy who matters, the man who matters, you know that it doesn't matter whether you wear a bow tie or not. What matters are your ideas. Now, in Chattanooga, we have a broken legal system, and there's a story about similar doings as we find here. But the dateline is Nashville, and there's a photograph of Nashville police arresting Tin Man. And I'm not sure who Tin Man is. He's not in the story, but he must be a local character. And the account is about people who are charged with minor offenses. Let's say disorderly conduct. That's an unconstitutional statute that has 2 or 3 of its 5 provisions unconstitutionally vague, and it has not been challenged. There's hardly any case law, as they call court opinions case law, on that godless statute. And it's unconstitutionally vague because you don't know how to obey it. It's impossible to know whether you're obeying it or not. It hasn't been challenged because it's a throwaway charge. And we read that prosecutors handling misdemeanor cases invite accused people who are interested in pleading guilty to step forward and to finalize plea deals for suspended sentences and fines. But the problem is there are no defense lawyers, nor are any of the defendants advised that they are entitled to have one, right? Many of these cases are against poor people whom police officers know by sight, right? They start knowing who the poor people are. And is it time to take John in? That's kind of the question. That not has John committed a crime, but is it time to take him in? It's kind of this proprietary, patronizing police method that they have with familiar faces among the poor, right? People who don't smell good and who don't have a lot of personal property. In this story by ProPublica, I'm getting a copy from truthfight.com. The headline is misdemeanor defendants facing jail time, not told right to lawyer. That's the tag on this story. One defendant asked to see a judge. The prosecutor said that it was not possible, and that her only choice at that moment was to plead guilty or to plead not guilty and go to trial. In other words, you plead not guilty and have trial. Rarely are defendants told that they should consider going to the grand jury and seeing if the grand jury will just ignore the case or just throw it out as with a no true bill. The defendant could only speak to the judge, the prosecutor said, if she rejected the plea offer. Again, none of the defendants was told they had the right to see a lawyer before entering the plea. The scenes in Nashville's Court 1A last year are included in an American Bar Association report that looks at one of the most routine constitutional violations taking place in American courts every day: the failure to notify indigent defendants, that is to say poor defendants facing misdemeanor charges that they carry jail time, that they are entitled to an attorney. The report was released just a few days ago by the American Bar Association. Volunteer lawyers repeatedly observed both judges and prosecutors violate indigent defendants' right to counsel under Tennessee law. National DA Glenn Funk does not reply to an inquiry. The ABA report said that the lack of counsel for defendants facing misdemeanor charges punishable with time behind bars is, quote, an extremely serious and pervasive problem that can no longer be ignored or tolerated. Well, the bar accepts many, many violations of law routinely, and there are, and that would be by way of overlooking important defenses. I'm thinking in saying that of the right to travel conflict, and there the bar does not defend the people at all. It will not overturn the system. There is a shocking disconnect between the system of justice envisioned by the Supreme Court's right to counsel decisions and what actually occurs in many of this nation's misdemeanor or city courts. The ABA says it cites two Supreme Court decisions that establishing that many of those charged with misdemeanors are entitled to an attorney. There's a 1972 case that says such lawyers are required even in misdemeanor cases absent a valid waiver of counsel by the defendant. So in other words, unless there's a valid signing away your right to counsel, there has to be one assigned to you if you're a defendant. 30 years later, the report said the court made clear that defendants being offered suspended sentences, deals that spare defendants immediate imprisonment so long as they meet certain conditions, were also due representation by an attorney. This story has a heartbreaking discussion about a woman, a single black, age 37, with 3 children, ages 14, 10, and 8. Her disabled grandmother also lived with her. She worked 2 jobs to take care of her family and brought home just under $1,200 monthly. After paying rent of $715, she had very little left to meet everyone's needs. She reported having been to court 1A 5 times in the past 2 years, facing charges of driving on a suspended license. Again, that's the court system. The lawyers and the judges don't bother to tell her she doesn't have to have a license to travel. She has to have a license only to be involved in commerce, which is to say the activity of buying or selling, the carrying of people or goods for hire as a common carrier. No one tells her that she doesn't have to have a license unless she's doing that. No one says, no one cares. It goes on to say, this report, each time her experience was the same. She was assessed a fine that she could not afford, and for this reason, she wasn't able to get her license reinstated. So in other words, the system allows what it would clearly understand to be a civil death sentence on people such as this single black woman, age 37. A court bailiff overheard the ABA lawyers talking with this defendant. The bailiff then informed the defendant that she could go to the clerk's office on a different floor of the courthouse and ask for a waiver that might lower the amount of the fine. I get this. This is how the system works, okay? It's brutal, and guess whom it hurts the most? It hurts the poor, the ignorant, and then people who are black. They are especially harassed by this system. They are especially harassed by it, especially in the area of travel and the so-called suspension or revocation or expiration of driver's licenses. The defendant told the ABA lawyers that during her previous appearances in Nashville's courts, she was never told about the form, even after telling the court she could not pay the fines. Several ABA observers went with her to the clerk's office to obtain a dozen of the forms to make them available in Court 1A. And here's what the clerk said. The clerk replied that she was only permitted to hand out 1 copy, and people who needed them had to request them from her directly. When the observers asked how defendants were supposed to know that these forms existed, she replied that they would have to know they existed in order to request them. So you see, there's no way to win. These courts make it impossible to win. We have a bastard court system. We have a court system which is unjust, which rolls over the poor, it rolls over the ignorant. And because we have a system that allows policing would be cut 95% if defendants said, I want to be indicted. But we have a system in which the state allows policing to remain at such huge volumes, and that is called the Public Defender's Office, run by Steve Smith. That office is a plea bargain mill where people, assuming they get an attorney, they're advised to plead guilty and get away with as little damage as they can, because that system allows the state to bring these people into the system, adopt them, tar them, feather them, mark them, blot them, blight them, and then let them go without having to go to jail. We have a lot of damaged people unable to get jobs. And we have a system that allows policing and commercial enforcement through policing to continue at a very, very high rate, though it's worse elsewhere. But let's not take comfort in that. We have a bad situation in Nashville. We have a bad situation in Chattanooga. This is David Tulis, and we need reform now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240.